science team. I received my bachelor's and master's in physics and then found out about the wonderful world of planetary science. And so completely changed course and completed my PhD in Earth and Planetary Sciences at Johns Hopkins University. And so we were encouraged to put our hobbies on these slides. And I got married shortly before the pandemic started, and then the pandemic hit. And so I realized that I hadn't really had time to get into my hobbies. I spent the time before the pandemic planning a wedding and the time afterwards sitting at home. So I did put, some of the shows that Lamar and I have been, my husband Lamar and I have been binge watching. All Rise is my favorite. We've been looking at Snowpiercer and From, and I like reading historical novels. So I just finished Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson, and it was wonderful. I want to get back to finishing The Feast of All Saints by Anne Rice. And this picture to the bottom left is not a picture of our daughter. It's actually a picture of me when I was a kid doing what I did as a kid, playing with dolls. These are our Cabbage Patch dolls. One is my sister's and one is mine. And so I just put that up here to show that we all come to planetary science from different paths. A lot of times I talk to students and people ask me to submit pictures of me playing with my rock collection. And although I did collect rocks, I did that about 5% of the time. 95% of the time I was playing with dolls or playing with, more specifically Barbie dolls, or watching some cartoon like Jem and the Holograms. So we all come from different paths, and that's me.
That's fantastic. I love this. I love the picture with the Cabbage Patch dolls. I personally didn't have them, but I have a pretty fabulous collection of dinosaur toys. That was my toy of choice. Okay, thank you, Lynnae. So next up, we have Dr. Andy Rivkin.
Hi, I'm Andy Rivkin. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm principal professional staff at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. Knew Lynnae when she was in grad school. My slide isn't nearly as cool, but I do have, I didn't put this on here, but I'm a bit older. I came to planetary science back before the space shuttle. So Viking landing on Mars was my first sort of experience with NASA. I was 6 or 7 years old. I thought it was amazing. And then the Voyager missions started just after that. So that's what I thought NASA did. I didn't know astronauts were really a thing for several years. I was a planetary scientist. I went to MIT as an undergrad and was a major in Earth atmospheric and planetary sciences. I went to the University of Arizona and was a planetary scientist there. My research has always been telescope oriented. So studying asteroids with telescopes. As asteroid missions became more and more of a thing over the course of my career, I proposed, was PI of a mission proposal called Mantis that I'm sure we'll talk about, that was not selected, or at least hasn't yet been selected. And then got involved in the Double Asteroid Erection Test, DART, which is en route to meet its fate later this fall. I'm also associated with Dawn and New Horizons and Deep Space One, but not in a much more peripheral way with those. We were encouraged to show our hobbies, but I didn't have a good one of me playing guitar that I was willing to show. So instead, here's me and my colleague and partner in crime, Nancy Chabot, who is basically the project scientist for DART. In that upper left picture there, we're standing in the clean room with the spacecraft behind us. On the right there, we're standing in California with it on the pad behind us. And then that lower left picture there is in space, as it was just released from the SpaceX telescope, SpaceX booster. I did put my Twitter handle there. I'm active on Twitter. Whether or not I'm too active on Twitter is a matter of some debate. So you can follow me there. And like I said, I took down the DART thing so you can see a little more of the background and a little more of what my office is like in character. And I can also match Lynnae when she showed her picture of her with a Cabbage Patch doll. Here's my OG. I was in high school when they got me this. So I'm a little too old for cabbage patch dolls, but I have one and it's sitting in my office to this day. So that's what I got right now.
That is awesome. All right, that is so cool. Thank you, Andy. And we will circle back to some of those missions that you mentioned. Okay, so next up, we have Dr. Ryan Anderson. Ryan?
Okay, my background is physics and astronomy. So I sort of got into space through that path, you know, reading Carl Sagan and taking astronomy classes in high school. So I thought, yeah, I love space. I'll go study astronomy. And then I realized what I really love is planets. Astronomy is awesome, but planets are sort of the sweet spot for me because it mixes all different sciences together, and I didn't really want to pick one. And so I studied astronomy and physics at University of Michigan, and then went to Cornell for grad school. And I got involved during grad school with the Mars exploration rovers. My supervisor was Jim Bell, who leads the color cameras on those rovers. And then through that mission involvement, I got involved with, through a graduate fellowship, I got involved with working with LIBS data, laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy. And that was sort of my foot in the door into ChemCam. And I made myself useful enough on ChemCam that they asked me to be a co-I on SuperCam. So on the right, Curiosity and Perseverance are the two missions that I'm most involved with now. I do a lot of the sort of behind the scenes trying to go from a squiggly line spectrum to chemical composition accurately, which is non-trivial. The other thing that I do a lot is shown in the lower left. I'm the outreach communications lead for astrogeology. And so that's a picture of me standing in front of our newly renovated hallways where we put up some pretty pictures rather than the accumulated detritus of 20 years of people's just random screenshots and stuff.
Yeah.
So we tried to make the halls a little prettier, and I like to give tours and public talks and things like that. Sort of share all the cool stuff that we're doing with the people who are paying for it. So that's me. The two middle pictures at the top is field work in Hawaii. I don't do like actual field work. This is like a class, a learning field work where we just went and we, as grad students, we learned planetary mapping and what it looks like on the ground at a lava flow, which is really useful if you're mapping from orbit. It's good to know what you're actually talking about. And at the bottom is I actually did an internship at LPI, and we went over to Johnson Space Center and got to wear the bunny suits and reach in the lunar sample boxes and stuff like that. So that's me. Up in the middle, the top middle, I'm active on Twitter as well. So please feel free to hit me up, send me a message if I don't answer a question that you have, or if you think of something later. I'm happy to talk on Twitter. So that's me.
Thanks so much for sharing that. You were an LPI intern?
Yeah, 05.
Oh, that's so cool. All right, well, see, you know, get your foot in the door with internships, and we'll talk a little bit more about those later, but that's so cool. I had no idea. All right. Next up, we have Lydia Kevrak. Lydia, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Florida. I am a rising fourth-year PhD student, and I am a student collaborator on Perseverance and have been for the last couple of years. And I also recently joined the Curiosity team as well. My research interests are in astrobiology. I work on biosignature detection in analog environments, so environments on Earth that are kind of similar to environments on Mars. I unfortunately have not been able to get out into the field lately because of COVID, but here is a picture of me at field camp back in undergrad. And but I do hope to get out in the field later next month, which is very exciting. And in my copious amounts of free time, I enjoy playing the piano, singing all varieties of music, and also doing theater. Happy to meet everybody.
And what was your undergrad background in?
My undergraduate background was actually in planetary science, but I started out as an astrophysics major for about a couple of weeks before I decided that that was not for me.
I also took astrophysics classes, and then, you know, the calculus really kind of ran me off. So that was my reason. Well, awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. Before we get into questions, I just want to share a little bit of information about the resource packet. So we're going to be sharing this out through the chat. You'll receive a follow-up email from Zoom with the link, and it will be posted on the webpage and in the YouTube recording description. So you should be able to find this. It is a 24-page document with just tons and tons of different information about programs that can help you get your foot in the door or give you additional research experience, funding, whatever it might be. So there's a section for internships and fellowships, so research opportunities. There's a section for funding in terms of like scholarships and grants. And then there's an additional section that has professional networks, opportunities for outreach and engagement, other ways to be involved. And the way that each of these are written, there's the name of the program at the top in bold. At the top left is the program or the institution that runs the program. The top right is the discipline or focus of the program, not necessarily the discipline or focus of those who should apply though. Then there's a description of each program. The bottom left is who the program is open to. And the bottom right is a general deadline for applying. And then each of these links is active and takes you to the webpage. So there will probably be a lot of questions about what are resources for high school students? What are resources for someone with a computer science background? Please refer to the resource document. There's a lot of stuff in here. And if you can't find something or you're familiar with the program and it isn't listed, please reach out to me, and we're always trying to update this document. And then finally, if one of the items is listed in gray, that just means that this is actually a searchable database. So you could go here and put in your specifications and look for opportunities. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff in the resource packet, and it's for everyone from high school up to professional level scientists. We added a lot of information specifically for postdocs, and those are, they start around page 11 or 12. Okay. So one of the programs that's featured in our resource packet, for instance, just to give you an idea, is the Dragonfly Student and Early Career Investigator program. And I'm going to let Lynnae tell you a little bit more about that.
Sure thing. Thanks, Grace. And so, as Grace mentioned, this is the Dragonfly Student Early Career Investigator program, and I am the lead for this program. And every year we put out a call for up to 3 graduate students to join us on our mission for a tenure of about 2 years, working on specific projects with Dragonfly team members. And this program is a little bit different. We really aim to broaden participation for those who think about planetary science as a career and who want to, who think about, planetary mission work. And so really, we're hoping to receive applications specifically from students in STEM fields such as chemistry, biology, physics, math, engineering, computer science, but who have not yet necessarily done any planetary science research and don't have links to any type of planetary mission work either themselves or through mission work that their advisors do. And so for anyone who is from that broad swath of STEM majors, especially those that have would be very new to planetary science and may not even be majoring in planetary science and may go to institutions where there are no geology, planetary science, or astronomy departments. Please check out the webpage. Our application for this year's cohort just passed on May 27th, but we solicit applications around January-ish of each year. So between December of 2022 and January of 2023, we'll be having another call. Thanks, Grace.
Thanks so much. So absolutely, this is a fantastic program. And like Lynnae emphasized, you don't have to have a planetary science background if you don't, but skills across STEM disciplines are encouraged to apply. And that's true for a lot of the programs that we show in the packet. Okay, so what we're gonna do real quick is just to kind of now transition into thinking about the goal for this program, which is to learn more about how to get involved in mission science. What we're gonna do now is a chat storm. If you haven't done one of these before, let me just quickly explain. We're gonna take like 30 seconds. I'm gonna give you a prompt, a question to answer. You'll type it out in the chat, whatever your response is, but you won't press enter. So you won't enter your question or your answer to the question until I say so. And then what's going to happen is the chat will just fill up with everybody's answers. Yours will be lost in a flood, but that way we don't have to worry about, people seeing your responses. It's just put it out there. The answer to this question: if you're pursuing mission science, whatever your path currently is, what is an obstacle that you're facing? So you can type this out in the chat and have it ready to go, and I'll tell you when to enter it. But maybe it's you're struggling to network. What's that?
Yeah, sorry to be the old here. Is this you want the panelists to do this, or you want the participants to do this?
Everyone.
Everyone. Right.
Everybody. Panelists can do it if they want to. If you're struggling with something right now, you can put it in. But definitely our participants, please think about, maybe you're just not aware of opportunities. Maybe you're aware of them, but you're not getting accepted. Maybe you're struggling to network. Whatever it is, think about it. I'm going to be quiet, and then I'll tell you when to enter it.
And for our panelists, if any of you have particular obstacles that you faced earlier in your career that you want to share those out as well, that would be great too. And so Grace, we'll give them what, 20 more seconds?
Oh, let's say like less than 10.
Okay.
Like, here we go. These don't have to be long. 3.
Don't hit return yet. Hold on. Don't hit return yet.
1, and let's say go. Return.
Go.
Oh,
awesome.
Look at them coming in. Awesome. Okay. If you're still typing, go ahead and put it in. But when you have a moment, you can scroll through these and see you're part of a big community. Lots of people are facing challenges, and we're going to try to address some of those today. And do any of our panelists have, maybe what was a challenge you faced early on or are facing now that you want to share? We'll get to these if you don't have one on the top of your head.
I think something that is a challenge is that given how a lot of these missions are put together and these mission teams and the nature of the process as it exists now, people put in a proposal, they put their team together, they put the proposal in, the proposal often doesn't get selected on the first try, it goes back for a second try, maybe it comes back for a third try, and mixing up the team becomes a question. And by the same token, if you're early career and you see here's this mission that looks like it's in great shape, they're going to propose it, how do I get involved? And of course the people already on the team say, we've been working on this for 20 years, who are you? So that's a real challenge in both directions, I think. That it's not clear there's a single answer.
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent point, and that's definitely something I want to talk more about. I'm learning a lot about mission science, and the great length over which these projects operate is really interesting and also seems very challenging. All right, so we are going to move into our Q&A now. And what we're going to do, we ask panelists, attendees, if you have questions, you can enter them in the chat, or what's a little bit easier is enter them in the Q&A. We can see them a little bit easier. And we're going to go through and pick your questions. You have a little bit of time to enter them. We have, what we're going to do is about 20 minutes of moderated Q&A, where I'm going to be asking questions of our panelists, kind of get the discussion going. And then we're going to start taking questions from the audience. Okay, so please, as you have questions, just put them into the Q&A. All right. Well, so first off, I'm going to just kind of start off with a broad scale question. And I'd like Andy to start first, but then please, anyone else jump in as you have input, is this question of what is the process of starting a mission project? Like, what does that look like? What is there a call? Do you just write a proposal? How do you start? How do these things get born?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at the very top level, there are two kinds of missions. There are those that are competed, where you have a PI in charge, where NASA says, we are going to put, see what you can do for this amount of money, for $500 million or for $800 million. Look at this list and see which of these things you can do. Dragonfly was one of those second kind where they said, see what you can do for this money. The Lucy mission, the Messenger mission were that first list of, $500 million. Convince us that you've got this great idea. So those are competed missions. There's also this thing called directed missions, where no one group, NASA didn't say, hey, for $6 billion, what do you want to do? NASA said, we want to fly a really, really capable space telescope, and we're going to devote the money it takes. And now the result is JWST or the Curiosity rover or something. So for that first group, the one where you are competing, where you put together a proposal to a NASA call, that process can start very early, because you need to think about, you don't always know when those opportunities are going to show up. So it'll often start with a conversation among a few colleagues. Maybe you've got a piece of paper that you kind of just literally sketch out your mission plan, and then you have to convince some engineers to spend some time thinking about it. Something like 90 or 95%, or maybe even 98% of mission ideas don't get off the board. Some of them stall out at that first place where they say, oh, this actually, the physics just doesn't work. We can't actually do this. And some of them get all the way to the point where the person in charge of NASA says, nope, we want this one. And that one came close, but is not what we want. And then putting the teams together, you don't want to get a group of 50 people together when all you've got is your one piece of paper and you're trying to convince yourself that it's physically possible. So as you move along the process, the team expands. You try to get people who fit who fit the science you want to do. It's really hard not to just go out to your cronies to say, we were in grad school together and we had a great time together. But on the other hand, there is something to be said for having a working relationship with someone who you can work with, who is you can be honest with, who's not going to be just someone who agrees with you, just to stay on the team. So it's a funny process, and there's no single answer. And I suspect every single mission is put together slightly differently. I guess for closing here, I'll just note that Janet Vertesi is a sociologist who studies how missions are put together, and the sociology of missions. She's got a few books that are out, and so people who are interested in that can go read those books, because she did her PhD on this, and has put a couple of really great books out.
Wow, I never thought about that. What an interesting area for a sociology study. Whoa. Well, so I wanted to ask, and someone did ask, if you know the names of the books or the author?
I'll look that up and put it in the chat.
Thank you. All right, well then, so another question that I have, and anyone else, anyone please feel free to answer, is, so once you're putting together a team, are there restrictions about who can serve on a mission team? Do they have to be a NASA contractor or employee? Do they have to be at a certain kind of institution? How does that work?
Well, I don't want to filibuster. Certainly, other folks can jump in. I don't want to. So I will talk, but only if other people don't want to put in what they know.
We'd love your input.
Okay, so you do not need to be a NASA employee. I am not a NASA employee. The Alan Stern, who is the PI of the Pluto mission, is not a NASA employee. Lydia Elkins-Tanton, who runs the Psyche mission, is not a NASA employee. You almost always, I don't know if there's literally a requirement that a NASA center be involved. Whether or not it's a literal requirement, it's effectively the case that practically all missions involve either JPL or NASA Goddard or NASA Glenn, or APL is kind of a funny, not quite a NASA center, but we get involved a lot. Non-US people who are not American citizens can be involved. If they are at a US institution, they're treated, I think, more or less like any other person who's resident in the United States. If they are at a non-US institution, usually it's the case that that NASA cannot pay for work that is done by people at non-US institutions. So the InSight lander has instruments from France, and I think from Germany. So they basically had to work a deal where Germany agreed that Germany would pay for the German instrument, and Germany would pay for the German COIs, and France would pay for the French COIs, and there would be a swap of some kind that made it all work out okay. So international collaboration is great. International, a lot of these things, the Indian lunar missions often have non-US, have non-Indian contributions. The same for Japan. So it's a great way to get onto other missions, but it does come also with some red tape.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Andy. Even though I am a civil servant at NASA Goddard, most of the folks who are mission team members on the missions that I'm on, and most of the people that I do research with are not at NASA centers. So you definitely don't have to work at a NASA center or work for NASA to be on any of these missions.
Thank you. Well, and so I wanted to follow up a question for Ryan. So you said that you work with specific instruments on Curiosity and on Perseverance. So how does that work? Like the mission structure of, say, like one of these rovers, but then there's different teams for different instruments. Like can you describe the organization?
Right. So for these sorts of big missions, often NASA will say, we want to send a rover, and we want it to generally be able to do X, Y, and Z. And then the competition is not, are they going to send the rover? They're going to send it. The competition is for the different instruments that will get slotted into that body, basically. And so the instruments that I'm on, ChemCam and SuperCam, made the case against a bunch of other proposals that they would be able to accomplish the mission science the best for the weight and cost and energy and all those factors that go into how do you put a spacecraft together, along with the suite of other instruments that are selected. So in that case, the proposal is for an instrument, and the selection is made by NASA, and the selection is made sort of as a suite. So they say, well, we're going to take this instrument because it's complemented by this instrument that we're also going to take, and they put together, they accomplish the goals of the mission or whatever. And so, yeah, in that case, it's not competing for the whole spacecraft, it's competing for the slot on the spacecraft.
So do you have an idea of like how many people, how big the overall, say, like Perseverance team is when you combine all the different instruments?
It's larger than I can easily think of. It's in the hundreds of scientists,
mm-hmm.
and then there's the whole engineering side, which is larger.
Yeah.
Because for every instrument, there's a bunch of engineers, and then for every, to make every aspect of the rover work, there's a whole team of engineers that are specialized in that. So it's a huge team, and so most of the time I'm working with my small group within the instrument, but part of being on the mission is doing mission operations, and there you interact with the broader team, both science and engineering, to try to direct what the spacecraft does each day. And so, but even then, you don't have 1,000 people on the call every day. It's a handful who have time that day. And
Yeah.
so you get to know people, but there are tons of people on the team who I've never met, for example.
Oh, that's wild. That's so many people for some of these big missions. Yeah, so that was going to be one of my questions, was how often or in what ways you interface with these other groups who share a mission with you but have a distinct team.
Yeah, so there are occasional science team meetings where people from the science team get together and we talk about our science. And that's really where we hear the most from the other instrument teams, like what are their coolest new results and what are they working on? And, are we going to be able to take a new type of data product soon? That sort of stuff is what comes out of team meetings. And those happen a couple times a year. The rest of the time, it's the daily grind for rovers or the occasional grind for orbiters and other spacecraft of what are we going to do? What are we going to target? Where are we going to collect data from? And so you work with whatever team is on that day.
Okay.
And so some people are super active in that and other people could care less. They just want to analyze the data. And so you get different subsets of the team in different contexts.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. If you're like, I don't care what it does, I just want to see the results. So Lydia, as a student who's working with data from the Mars rovers, are you getting to participate in any of these like operations meetings? What is that like as a student?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the, pretty much all of the opportunities on the rover are accessible to students. You sort of just have to start from the bottom in terms of working in roles that don't have as much difficulty to them. So for instance, I have worked on the mission as a tactical documentarian, which means that I write up the notes of what happened during planning for that Mars day. And I make note of the major decisions that were made during the day, such as we decided that we wanted to look at this rock with ChemCam versus this rock because the rock that we decided to look at is located on some interesting transition between different rock units. Or we decided to have a look at the atmosphere today because we had space in the afternoon. So we decided to put in an extra observation there. So writing down those kinds of decisions, which is a sort of a low barrier to entry role on the mission, but is really good for learning how the mission works, how day-to-day planning works. So that's super exciting. In terms of instruments, I'm on the Sherlock team, and so we meet occasionally and look over data, and everybody is encouraged to speak up in those meetings, which is really great for getting to participate and feel like you are making a contribution to the mission, which is really exciting.
So you're able to take data that's been collected by people deciding they want to investigate this rock, and then you're able to get that data and use it directly for your PhD research?
Well, that's a little bit, you have to get permission for that, I think, or there's rules about sharing data with outside of the mission team, especially prior to that data being published. Ryan can correct me if I've gotten anything wrong on this. They're especially doing a PhD, you have multiple committee members who are guiding you along your PhD, and the committee members are often other professors at your institution who may or may not be on the mission. And so then there are some rules about how and when you can share data for your PhD. But generally, from what I have observed, people do often use their mission project work for their PhD dissertations. There are just a couple of hoops to jump through here or there.
Okay. Did any of the rest of you do something similar where you worked on a mission as you were a graduate student? No?
Yes, I was involved with MER. Most of my research was not MER, but I did do one paper as a grad student using more data, just because, you know, Jim basically made me, because he said, you're on this mission, you got to write something. So yeah, you use the data, and the main thing is, like Lydia was saying, you just have to be careful and make sure you have permission to share the data with the people you're sharing it with, and publish. You know, there's rules when you're on the mission. You have to let everyone know, like, hey, I'm writing a paper on this. If you want to be involved, you know, let's talk. Which is a great way to make connections and build your relationship with your colleagues. But it's also, you know, politically necessary for a team that large, because you don't want to scoop someone. You don't want to write conflicting results that could look bad to the world at large. You want to sort of represent a consensus of the team to the extent possible. You know, you do need to be able to publish your own results and your own interpretations, but you don't want to write something that sounds crazy, basically.
Yeah, you're representing a lot of people.
Yeah, like it's your paper, but really you're representing the team. So you just have to make sure that everyone is aware of what you're doing, basically, when you're on a big team like that.
What I remember, so this isn't firsthand, and this was 25-ish years ago, so take it with both times may have moved on in my memory, but I was at the University of Arizona as the Galileo mission was kind of coming close to its end, and I remember Zibby Turtle, who's now the PI of Dragonfly, being involved with, as a grad student, being involved with Galileo, along with Laszlo Keste and some other, who was a postdoc, and one of the grad students. And my impression is that as you have these missions that are long term, as they get kind of more routine, as they get past the initial rush of the the initial rush of data, the initial rush of results that the people who built and made the mission happen wanted to see happen. As you get into the extended missions, there gets to be more and more room for perhaps for students to be involved, as the principal scientists either move on or have gotten their appetites sated, and now
they got their fix.
And so I can I just jump in, Grace?
Please.
I did not work on any missions or look at use any current mission data when I was working on my dissertation. And the reason being, I study icy moons and ocean worlds, and the Galileo mission, which had gone to the Jupiter system, had, you know, it was over by then. The Cassini mission, which went to the Saturn system, had already made team selections, probably when I was in high school or I was an undergrad. And so I did look at old Galileo data, and I used that for my dissertation and was able to work with folks who had been on missions. Andy just mentioned Zibby Turtle. I also worked with Louise Proctor quite a bit, who was on the Galileo team, and that work that I was able to do for my dissertation translated into openings for me to be on the Europa Clipper team and also on the Dragonfly team. But if you're not able to have access to planetary mission data, or you're at a university where there are no planetary mission team members, don't think that will cut you out of having these types of opportunities.
Thank you. That is exactly where I was going to try to get to. That's perfect. And Lynnae, I have a question for you before we move on, and kind of for everyone, but I want to start with you. So what is the day-to-day job of a co-PI on a mission look like? And aside from being a scientist and doing research, what are the skills that you're using and that you've developed to take on leadership roles?
Sure. So I'll try to answer that in two parts. So both of the missions that I'm on are in development. As I mentioned, neither Dragonfly or Europa Clipper has launched, but Europa Clipper will be launching, we plan next year. So the day-to-day is trying to find time to carve out my own research versus doing that mission work and some of the roles on the mission that I do. Also, for Europa Clipper, one thing that I focus on is trying to, or that my role focuses on rather, is trying to find these geyser-like plumes that we believe are erupting from Europa's South Pole. And so a lot of my research involves modeling these plumes. We don't expect them to be just like Enceladus's plumes. We think they're more sporadic, maybe more difficult to image. So modeling these plumes and using the math and all of that calculus that I have from that nice physics background to try to figure out the timing of when they might erupt, so that when we get there with the spacecraft, we'll be able to catch them in the act. And so in addition to that, we have on certain days, we have meetings just for our little subset, our little team. And when I say our subset or our team, I mean, I'm on the camera team for Europa Clipper. So twice a month, we have telecons where we talk about the status of the camera and the status of the science that we want to be able to achieve with the camera once we get to Europa. We also have, as someone mentioned earlier, team meetings once a year where the whole science and engineering team comes together and talks about our plans for the mission. And so it's just this nice mix of focusing on research and then focusing on the mission that's in development and seeing how my research can feed into informing us what we need to do once the spacecraft gets there. What was your second question, Grace? Oh, you're muted.
Yes, I am. My second question was the kinds of skills that you find yourself using most of the time, other than your research skills that you developed as a student.
Sure. Writing, a lot of writing. And I'm glad that I took lots of those English courses and humanities courses, not only writing up research, but writing to communicate via email with team members who are on different parts of the globe, who have different cultures, and you want to make sure that you can communicate effectively so people know what you're saying, but so that you are not offensive in the way that you communicate. That's something that I've noticed with a lot of researchers, that written communication is not there. So I would say writing, good writing skills, good oral communication skills. I still go to conferences and present my research. I'm here talking to you all today. So you have to be able to communicate in that way. What else would I say? There's a lot more. Being able to work in a team and being able to get along with people and be able to work on a singular goal, but also being able to be independent and work by, myself. I study cryovolcanism, which is not something that a lot of folks in our field study. We have maybe one or two other people at NASA Goddard who study that phenomenon. So I really have to be able to be confident enough to work with these mathematical models and use data to, produce models of what we think are happening on these icy moons.
Yeah, if I could just jump in and echo what Lynnae said and totally agree. I don't do simulations of icy, cryovolcanism stuff. And I reduce my data with Excel sometimes, which I don't know if I should admit. But I don't know if I should admit this either. I can't think of the last time I integrated something, but I write all the time. And learning to write, learning how to write well, learning how to write in a manner that gets across what you intend to get across and do so effectively is really, really a big part of the job that I don't think people necessarily realize until they're in the middle of having to figure out how to do it.
I think also from a student perspective, like even before you get to sort of the writing phase, for instance, of your PhD, knowing how to read well is also a really, really important skill, because I am just now getting to the point where I'm starting to write up a lot of results. But up to this point in my PhD thus far, it's been a lot and continues to be a lot of reading papers, knowing how to read papers quickly and effectively, knowing how to find the right papers and get to the really important part of that paper quickly is really important.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a huge part of research, is just knowing where to find the pre-existing research. Absolutely. All right, well, what I'm going to do now, we have a couple more poll questions, and we're going to transition now into questions for our panelists, going through your questions. Let's see. I will launch. Okay, so we. Oh.
Grace, I think your bandwidth slowed down a little bit there, so
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I got a message saying my internet was unstable. Thank you for launching the poll.
Sure. I wasn't sure if it was you or me, so.
Yeah, it was me. It's all right. Hopefully it smooths out. We're going to switch to taking audience questions now. So if you have a question for the panel and you haven't already put it into the Q&A, you can do that now, and we'll start working through those. And I see there's been a lot of discussion in the chat. That's awesome. If you entered a question in the chat and it hasn't been answered, it might have just gotten lost in the flow. You can re-enter it, or you could put it in the Q&A. All right, and so these poll questions are just trying to gauge the kinds of research experiences and interests that you attendees have. So what sorts of experiences have you engaged in, whether that's coursework, writing a paper, participating in a mission? And there are many more experiences than the ones listed, of course. This is just to sort of get an idea of what people have done so far. And I see that results are still coming in, but a lot of people have already conducted independent research. That's fantastic, regardless of what field it's in. People are seeking internships and graduate positions. That's fantastic. And yeah, what is most important to you in looking for research? I see most people say personal interest in the topic, and I have to agree. You've got to be really excited about what you're doing. So I think I'll end the poll, and I'll show you guys our results just real quick. You can take a look. But again, a good spread of experience and a broad interest in different priorities. Okay, thank you all for participating. So we're going to move now into the Q&A that you all have entered through Zoom. So thank you all for doing that. There was one question I saw that I want to start with first, and that is this question from Mariam that asks, how and when do they decide to shut a mission down? And I'm going to add a question to that that asks, what happens to the people working on it when a mission comes to the end of its lifetime? So who wants to take that one?
I guess I'll start, and folks can clean up after me. The thing that overrides everything, the thing that needs to be remembered, is that the mission is NASA's. It might have been your brainchild. You might have come up with it and nurtured it and spent 30 years on it. But once you convince NASA to fly it, it's NASA's. So missions have been ended for reasons that range from some have been easier to swallow than others. The Magellan mission was the last time that the United States flew a mission to Venus. It ended in the late 80s, if I remember right, maybe mid 90s, early 90s. And it was a radar mission that flew around Venus, and NASA chose to end that mission in part to get aero braking data, or aero capture, aero braking, whatever, whichever one it was, for the Mars mission that was coming up. That's the last time we went to Venus, and the Venus mission ended because they were trying to get data for a Mars mission. But we had not flown a Mars mission in 20 years at that point. Some missions have mishaps and end. Those sorts of situations, NASA more or less just cuts off the money because there's nothing to be done. Your spacecraft is now in a zillion pieces. The DART spacecraft will hopefully be in a zillion pieces in just a few months. But since that's part of the plan, we'll have a year after the impact into Dimorphos to kind of get the ground-based data, to archive the data, to kind of do the closeout activities. So that's okay. Something like the Mars rovers or Cassini has what's called a senior review. And every few years, they have to put in a proposal to say why they should get money for an extended mission, keep going for a few years. New Horizons is still going. New Horizons past Pluto. It did an extended mission proposal to go past Arrokoth. They have an extended mission to just keep going, with the argument in part that they are a unique spacecraft in a unique place, and they can collect data on particles and fields and the heliosphere that no one else can get. So as long as they can convince the reviewers, that's what they'll do. The Voyagers are still going. I said how they were part of what inspired me to become a planetary scientist when I was 6 or 7 years old in the late 70s. They have to put in their senior review. They have to convince people the same thing. They've got their one instrument going with some tiny bandwidth, and who knows how long they'll last. So it's a bunch of reviewers at NASA that decide, is the science to be returned still worth the cost of operating the mission? We had seismometers on the moon that the Apollo astronauts left, and they were turned off because NASA decided they were not worth continuing to operate at some point in the mid-70s. And yeah.
And so I'm curious too, for, let's say, in terms of like people's funding, are there any positions that are like 100% funded by a mission? And if that mission ends, people need to find a new one? How does it just depend on your institution?
Not seeing. Oh, I do see someone unmuting. Great, you can take that one, Ryan.
I'll try. I think it's pretty rare to be 100% on one mission.
Right.
Right now, I'm a significant amount of my time is on both ChemCam and SuperCam, especially SuperCam because it's a relatively new mission. So when the mission starts out, you'll have if you're on the mission, you generally spend a bunch of time on it. But even then, it's not 100%. You've got other stuff going on. And as the mission continues, that funding wedge decreases and you start working on your next mission or your next proposal to fill in that gap. So there's always something sort of on its way out and something on its way in, and the big thing that you're working on at the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so you have a position at an institution, and through that position, you're able to work on different projects as they come up.
Right, and I think that's pretty typical. Almost no one is on one project 100%.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that seems to be my understanding, not too dissimilar from maybe some of the structures in academic funding, where you have proposals that have a lifetime, and when those end, you seek new ones, but you do get some of your funding from your particular home institution. So another question that just came in, is a PhD required to work for most mission jobs?
I think it depends on what side of the mission you want to be on. Most of the engineers, at least that I know that work on the missions that I'm involved with, don't have PhDs. They may have a master's degree, and some of them maybe just a bachelor's degree. But when it gets down to the scientists, the vast majority of scientists do have PhDs, and I think that's a factor of PhDs being the terminal degree for most scientists. And if you want to be a principal investigator and control the type of research that you do and control the type of instruments that you're able to build and be in charge of, usually having a PhD is what people expect for you to have. But I'd be happy to hear from the other panelists about what their thoughts are and what their experiences have been.
Yeah, I agree that that it depends. That a lot of the engineers, many of the engineers here at APL who work on space projects have bachelor's degrees. Some have masters. Some are working to get their PhDs, or the engineer in charge of DART does have a PhD. And then yeah, it's pretty common for folks on the science side of these missions. So I agree with you.
And then I see a couple different questions. I'm going to try to combine, but people basically asking, you know, coming from various backgrounds, maybe they've been out of school for a while, maybe they're coming from a slightly different industry, but wanting to know what are ways to get into these positions. So can you guys tell me a little bit about, like, are these positions, like on missions, are they advertised somewhere? Is this mostly like you learn about them through networking? What is your sense of how someone maybe from the outside who's not already, say, a student working with a scientist who's on a mission, how they could find out about ways to get involved?
What I guess yep. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to sort of get your foot in the door. There are times when, you know, a mission or an instrument team will be searching for a certain skill set and they'll advertise. I did this a couple years ago for a postdoc I was looking for, and we just put out an opening for someone who had the skills that I was looking for. So they do exist. It does happen, but to get in at the very beginning of a mission, you basically, it's networking. It's really hard to do that without networking, because it's, you know, like Andy was saying, the people who are writing these proposals, they turn to, oh yeah, I know my friend from grad school can do that, or, you know, I trust this person I've worked with before. And so that's how the mission team initially is built. And then, so yeah, sort of being added later in the process is possible. There are advertisements. For some missions, there'll be participating scientist calls where you can basically write a proposal and say, here's the really cool science that I want to do using the instruments of this mission. And here's how it fits in with the goals of the mission and how it fills a niche that's not being filled. And if you make the case to NASA, you can get added to the mission that way. And for some missions, that's a permanent thing. Other missions, you have to reapply every few years. Mm-hmm. So that is one way to sort of get into the mission if you're not sort of on the ground floor, right? So that's a rambling answer, but those are some of my thoughts.
Also, for folks who want to get in on missions, but not on the ground floor, as Ryan just mentioned, if you can do an internship with someone who is working on these missions, whether you're an undergraduate student or a graduate student. I saw there was a question about from Ashley Walker, who's an HBCU student. I found my love for planetary science by doing an internship at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab while I was working on my master's in astrophysics. And so if you're able to work with somebody, again, whether you're an undergraduate student or a graduate student who's on these missions, and maybe work with them for a series of summers, or even become a graduate student of someone who's working on these missions, that's a way to parlay yourself into mission involvement.
Maybe a little bit of that. Oh, Andy, did you have another point?
I don't know how useful a point. It's coming from the planetary astronomy end of things. It's also interesting because missions to some objects, comets and asteroids, aren't, you know, it is difficult. Mars is a geological object, right? Europa is now a geological object. Geologists are the ones who are coming up with the science questions and the ways to address those science questions. You know, the study of asteroids and comets still involves kind of a combination in a lot of ways of of missions and telescopes. So there is a potential, depending on what one's interests are, a potential avenue to be really become an expert in things without going via the mission route, and then potentially be able to hook into missions that way. If one goes the kind of planetary astronomy, small bodies kind of route, although that's a bit of a strange route. So not necessarily a well-trod one.
So this question of coming into it maybe from a different path, or even if you are, say, coming up in planetary science, geology, astronomy, you still really have to network, right?
Yes, but like Ryan was saying, to get in at the ground floor of a mission, yeah. But these participating scientist programs have been ways that NASA has specifically been trying to bring in new people and bring in new blood, and they have been seen as very successful, and particularly very successful in getting people who are otherwise not in those networks. Yeah. To bring them in. So that is something that people can look out for. It's not, they are for people who are past their PhD. But if you're in the field and you feel like you can contribute to a mission, those participating scientist programs are good things to try.
Well, and so Lydia, your advisor is a participating scientist, is that right? And so your position with her as one of her students, that's how you got involved with the mission?
Yes, exactly. My advisor got a participating scientist, which is sort of a type of grant that you apply for with a specific project in mind, accepted to join the Perseverance rover team. And so he was also able to bring students onto the team through that. So once I graduate, I will no longer be on the team unless I find a postdoc that also has a similar opportunity.
So that's really good to know. And yeah, thank you, Andy, for bringing up the participating scientists program, and Ryan. So for students who are maybe interested in getting into graduate programs or postdoctoral positions, if you want to work on mission science, you can look for faculty at universities or researchers at international labs, people who have gotten these participating scientist positions. And then if you work with them, they can help you get involved with a mission as a student or a postdoc. So that's another group of people that you can look for, and they're just called participating scientists on these different missions, and you can find lists of who has gotten those positions.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, you can do the same thing with people who are not participating scientists, people who are just on the mission.
Yes.
They'll be hiring as well, interns, students, etc. That's how I got in, is because my advisor was on a rover mission. And once I was working with him, then suddenly he's introducing me to everybody who's on all the rover missions. So yeah, getting whatever research connection you can make to the community of missions greatly increases your ability to be there and be available for the next mission, right? Because if people know you, oh yeah, that kid worked on this data set 5 years ago, now we're putting together a team, I could really use their skills. That's often how it happens.
And I'd say too, if you're at a university where there are no mission team members, but it's located near a research institution, take advantage of that. We have, again, I'm at NASA Goddard, which is in Greenbelt, Maryland, and we have students who are from area universities that take advantage of working with scientists. Many of us who are on missions coming to work with us during the summer or asking us to be a part of their thesis committees. That is a thing. And so that's one way as well. You don't necessarily have to be at an institution where you have a mission team member. And I also note, again, shameless self-promotion for our Dragonfly program, we are literally begging folks who do not have any mission experience, whose advisors have never worked on missions, who may not even be in planetary science, to apply. And a lot of the applications we get are from students whose advisors are already on missions. The students have worked on missions. They're already getting a graduate degree in planetary science. So kind of make sure when you're applying to programs, you kind of read between the lines. If we're saying we want a broad swath of students, and we're saying we specifically encourage students who are not already in planetary science and are not already working on missions to apply, please apply and keep applying if you don't get selected the first time.
And there are so many internships that are available, and many of them have rolling applications. Many of them are just during summers or can be done remotely. So do please look. And I think it's generally the case that it's never a waste of time to do any kind of research project, any kind of scientific research, whether it is specifically about planetary science or not. So a lot of what's included in the resource document are just general STEM type internships or fellowships. And so if I could get feedback from the panel about what do you think? I mean, if you were looking to work with a student or a young scientist and they didn't have specific planetary science experience, would that be a major problem for you?
No.
Right.
For me, I may be a special case, but most of my work is not actually, this is going to sound weird, it's not actually planetary science. A lot of my work is just data processing. How do I get this data to make sense? How do I make sure it's accurate? Because what I do is less, lead author of the science paper and more providing the raw materials for the scientists to work with. So I'm working, when I was hiring my postdoc a couple years ago, I wanted someone who knew a thing or two about planetary science in general, but I was mostly looking for programming skills, machine learning knowledge, statistics knowledge that I don't have, things like that. Someone who can help me with the work that I'm doing right now. And so, there's plenty of opportunities where you don't have to, be an expert on planetary geology or whatever to play a role. I saw someone earlier asking, is theoretical physics background going to be okay for doing planetary? Even if you're working on an instrument that's like SuperCam or ChemCam, technically they're measuring geochemistry. So you'd think all we want are geochemists. Well, no, they make a little laser plasma. We need plasma physicists. So like I said very early on, the fun thing about planetary is that everything is connected. It's not just one type of science. So if you've got skills, we want them. Doesn't matter what your degree says.
I like that message. Absolutely. Any kind of skill development that students and early career scientists can build is going to be useful in some way. So I think just looking for those opportunities and apply rather than worry that it might not be the perfect fit.
I saw several people mentioning imposter syndrome. We all have it. We're all imposters. But you got to apply. You are guaranteed not to get it if you don't apply. You might not get it if you do apply. So.
And I'll jump in and just say, as someone who came to planetary science not having taken a geology class or having had that background, I wouldn't be here if I was told way back when that you have to be a planetary scientist to work on these missions and actually do this planetary research. And for that reason, I actually look for interns who may have a background such as physics or math, and just hoping they can have an opportunity to learn how they can apply that to planetary science. So I agree with what everyone has said here. Definitely don't only look for planetary science students.
Yeah. Let me see. I've got This kind of goes along with this question from Rebecca that asks, how can we know if LPI internship projects available are for us? So in general, the website does not provide too many details on the mentors or the specific area. And that's because you're not expected to come in with the skills that you'll need to complete the internship project. And I think that's almost always the case, is understanding that whether you're an undergraduate intern, a high school intern, or a postdoc, you're going to have certain skills that you come in with, and there are others that you're just going to have to learn when you get there. And especially for something like the LPI internships, they're expecting to train you. So you'll come in with some skills, and those will be used to great effect, and others you'll learn while you're doing the program. And they're going to be specific, and they will be just for that project, and you'll probably find ways to apply them in the future, or you won't, but that's part of what doing the internship is about, is just learning the set of skills, showing that you can be adaptable for the project, and then you just keep adding to your tool set. But so please apply. Those internship applications will open in December. And we encourage applicants from all different backgrounds.
Yeah, I was just going to riff a little bit off of that, not specifically with the LPI stuff, but one of the uncomfortable things about just kind of life, I guess, is that a lot of this is happenstance. A lot of this is, I don't necessarily want to say luck exactly, but even if you pick a project that you think is perfect for you and the perfect mentor and you're in the perfect circumstances, it still might not end up being what you're doing. It might be, that you're profoundly affected by happening to see a talk that you sat in on because someone stood you up for lunch, or some other thing. You take some class to fill an hour-long hole in your schedule, and you love it. So leave room for that in your head. Leave room for for things that you aren't expecting, for the opportunities that just show up for something that grabs you and you think you want to pursue a little bit.
All right, well, we're getting close to time.
I'm sorry, Grace froze. Wait while her internet catches up. So, hi everyone. We're going to wait for Grace's internet to catch up. We do have just a few more minutes left for some remaining questions, but we're not going to be able to get to all of them. That being said, there will be a third Road to Mission Science that will be taking place in another month and a half. So we'll try to catch up some of those questions then. Grace, I think you're all caught up in terms of video, so I'm going to let you continue.
Oh, it's coming in and out. Maybe I missed it. Was the answer no other questions that the panel wants to get to right now?
We didn't hear your question. So panelists, please, are there specific questions either under the Q&A or in the chat that each of you would like to address?
I'll try to do two quick ones. One, there's the question about people with soft money jobs. Are there jobs that lead to a guaranteed salary? Civil servants have guaranteed salaries, so Lynnae, can talk about that. Professors at universities basically have guaranteed salaries, at least for 9 or 10 months of the year. They are very much involved in missions, and then whether they are planetary scientists or not depends on what they can convince their employers to let them do, I guess. And there's the one about moving into planetary space science from defense or other fields. Again, I guess it's the same sort of thing that there's some amount of networking. If you're an expert in something and it's applicable, then, if you're a hydrologist on Earth and you're really interested in Mars or the icy satellites, and you can figure out how applying hydrology to these other celestial bodies works, then read the literature and see what you might be able to do.
Any others? If not, I have one final question for you all. Okay, well then I'll pose this final question, which is kind of just, how do you see the field of planetary science going into the future? Do you think that there are going to be more opportunities, more missions? Like, what are you excited about, and what's your general outlook?
Okay, I'll start. I'll say more ocean worlds. Selfishly, for me, looking at the icy moons of more planets. Hopefully, we should get back to Uranus and looking at its icy moons, and hopefully we get back to Neptune and look at Triton, which we believe has a subsurface ocean. So that is mostly what I'm excited about. And as we study these worlds, we get to learn if they have habitable environments. Yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
Andy, what about you?
All right. I think it'll be really interesting over the next few decades to see how more and more countries are getting have the capability to get out to the planets. I know, you hear about China talking about a Neptune orbiter and stuff like that. Private companies are gonna have the opportunity to play more of a role, and starting with lunar landers. So I think that if we can, I'll be an optimist, and I'll say I look forward to all sorts of more folks of more different backgrounds being more involved as we learn more about the solar system, and hopefully take care of things here on our home planet.
Yeah, I guess I'll say I think it's going to be interesting. I think Mars science is going to be sort of a different feel for the next little while, because there's a big focus on sample return right now, and less so on just sending new science rover missions and things like that. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I'm excited to see some of the new missions that are being talked about to historically neglected places like Venus and the outer solar system. I love Mars as much as the next person, but I'm excited to see some new data from new places.
I'm very excited about the Venus missions. And Lydia, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm really excited for Mars sample return and also the upcoming icy moon missions. I'm particularly excited for Europa Clipper because that's the soonest of all the upcoming icy moon missions. So really looking forward to getting to see Europa and study it at the level of Enceladus, for instance.
I'm very excited about the future of planetary science research, and I agree that ocean worlds just totally captures my imagination. I can't wait until there's like spacecraft, submarines, and boats and things like that. That's what I'm looking forward to. All right, well, so we're wrapping up the Q&A now. Thank you everyone for attending, and please express your thank you to our wonderful panel. Thank you all of you for joining us. We have a couple poll questions, so please respond to these, and then when you leave the webinar today, you're going to be sent to a survey, and your feedback is very, very valuable. We have one more of these Road to Mission Science programs coming up in September, and your responses to the surveys help us to make these programs better and better and more beneficial to those who are able to attend. So yeah, put in your responses. We'll give you, there's 3 questions here, so you'll need to scroll down.
While you're doing that, so a reminder, if you want to get an email announcement letting you know about the next Road to Mission Science, if you subscribe to LPI's newsletter, particularly click Community News, and you will get an email about that as we prepare for it, as Grace is working on it right now.
And I know the resource packet has been shared a couple times in the chat. I'll drop it in more times. The survey also has the link, so you can find it there. But please feel free to share this resource packet broadly within your networks, and contact me with any changes or additions. I noticed one typo in it, so you might find it. It's an Easter egg. All right, let's see. I'm going to close the poll in about 5 more seconds. All right. So once again, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you to our amazing panel. If you have like 5 minutes to stick around, I will do a quick debrief, but everyone else, our participants, you are free to go. The event is